from there.
So hello, I'm Anthony, founder at SeedLegals, and a good fraction of early stage funding rounds are done on our platform. I talk to lots and lots of founders, and I think one of the key things that jumps out for me is being a tech product kind of guy rather than a sales guy. You start by thinking, I want to build something, and only later do you think, I need to sell it. And it's that switching of gears from building it to selling it, which is super important, because otherwise you'll be forever building things and spending money rather than ever getting any revenue. But the charging for something is almost like embarrassing, and you feel embarrassed about reaching out and asking customers to pay. So I'll start maybe with one anecdote and then hand back to Purdy, which is when we started SeedLegals, I was literally the sales guy. I mean, there were only like 5 people, and I was literally sitting on a beanbag in the corridor outside our office to not disturb people because I was on Zoom calls, and I would be showing people and demoing to customers. And at the end of a demo, people would think the platform was amazing, but they wouldn't buy anything. And weeks would go by until somebody would buy. And then we hired our first salesperson, which is Abby. And I thought, this can't possibly work. I mean, she doesn't know anything about funding rounds and so on. And like on day 2, she did a customer demo, and literally 8 minutes later in our Slack channel, the person had bought a funding round open. And I was thinking, how is this possible? I know everything about the platform and funding rounds, and I'm not selling. Why are you? And the light went off, which is that for me, the success being the product founder kind of guy was showing people how clever the platform was. But for Abby, it was selling something. And I think that switching of gears from just making something, which of course you have to focus on and make it fabulous in what people want, but there should be others in the business whose focus, maybe you yourself, on providing value that people will actually pay for and do pay for. And to get to that point then gets you to the next level in investability, and of course being able to run your business as a profitable business, so you're not reliant on fundraising. So now over to you.
Okay, so we're going to split the conversation into 3. So we've got paying, staying, and referring. So let's start with paying. I guess from a SeedLegals perspective, what did you do, and do you have any opinion on free trials to get people bought into using your product, understanding the value that it creates, and then converting them later to paid?
Okay, so I don't claim to be an expert on this in any way, but I'm delighted to say that the journey we've been on, so if the idea is, freemium pay, I'd probably split it into 2 different concepts. One of them is in the really early stages of your business, you may not have something that is ready to be charged for. So, when we started, I mean, we were working out what funding rounds, what do people want? And it's like, I'm not sure I want to charge. The problem is if you don't start charging early, then you don't get to understand what the market will really pay for, and whether you've got something that's a vanity project, so people will try it while it's free, but as soon as you're paying it, then no one really wants it. So I think what you want to do is try to, as soon as you've got something that's not embarrassingly wrong that you can potentially charge for, you're not going to ask the person to pay up front, but you can get them to agree to pay when you've delivered the service. So asking someone to pay up front means that you're now on the hook for delivering a great experience, because people will be less forgiving if you've taken their money. But to get people to say, when I've done my funding round or you've delivered X or whatever, I'm agreeing up front to pay. This gives you a good data point. And if you can't get people to agree to that, then you've realized the first problem in your business, which you want to get to very rapidly. So too often, and by the way, there's an anecdote in my space, which is SeedLegals is sort of a B2C business. We sell to lots of startups, but many in the legal tech space sell to law firms. And they've got a serious problem, which is law firms have unbelievably long decision-making times. So too often when I talk to founders at legal tech businesses, their definition of success is, yes, we've got a proof of concept, or we've got a letter of intent, or we've got a trial going with like 4 law firms, and then they report that it takes a really long time to convert. So my advice is, if you are if you have possibilities of selling to different sectors, in my advice is always focus on the ones with the fastest decision-making time. So at SeedLegals, you know, we have three potential market segments. One of them is startups, one of them is investors, and one of them is law firms. So when it comes to addressing and selling to startups, you know, it turns out 30 minutes on a Zoom call is like, where have you been all my life? I'm in, I need my advance assurance. When it comes to selling to investors, they'll make a lot of noise about how fabulous and open-minded and so on. Cut to the reality is we do like 3 rounds a year, and Bob, our GC, has been with us since the late 1980s, and it's another 2 years till he's retired, so we'll consider it. And with law firms, it's our next partner meeting is in February next year, and we'd love to think about it. So quick takeaway points, which is one, focus on the market segment that will make the fastest decisions. And if you do want to be a B2B brand, maybe you start with the smaller decision makers in the company for a smaller product who can make decisions without needing exec approval. The next one is, you think that having lots of free users is good validation, and it is, but when you get to your investors, they're going to start drilling into why nobody's paying. So you need to have a clear strategy to get people to the proof point that they will pay. Otherwise, you'll tick the box with investors that you've got people using the free, but actually leave a bigger gap with investors about why they're not paying. So I don't know if I've quite answered the question, but let me then try to maybe the key part of that question, which is, should you just have a paid version, or should you have a free trial version? And if you have the free trial, should you get people to part with their credit card details beforehand, or let them try for free and then try to get them to convert? And if they're not converting, what is the reason? And here too, I don't know the answer. And within my team, there are many different points of view. Sometimes the sales team are much more aggressive in wanting to get people to put a credit card before they can do anything. For me, I like people to be able to try. I don't know if you'll want the platform. Maybe you're in Germany and you can't use it, or maybe you're an investor signing up to just try it out. And if I force you to pay with a credit card or put a credit card in, people who would otherwise just be trying it out won't even try it. On the flip side, if you can try without a credit card, then it becomes harder to convert afterwards. So in my case, I've settled on you can try without a credit card. After 7 days, you need to sign up. Some things you need to buy immediately, so you work out. If there's a lot of value the person could get in the trial period, you might want to have something that triggers. You can play around with all these things, you can get these things and do these things for free during the trial period. But if you want to actually like do a funding round in 7 days, well, you have to pay for something, because otherwise that's ridiculous. So it's the movement from the free trial to the paid, which, you know, in our case, we've oscillated around several times, the length of the trial period, the upsell. And I think where we've settled is that certain things are available on free trial. We don't ask for a credit card, but as soon as you start the free trial, it will trigger a HubSpot integration, which connects with our sales team, and someone in our one of our accounts manager will reach out to take that opportunity to turn that into a sale. So maybe my final takeaway point is, don't just create a system that relies on the user doing stuff and then getting to the outcome. Have your sales team actively reach out. I mean, obviously, if you have a social network with millions of users, that's not scalable. But if you've got a platform with a smaller number of potentially paying users, turn that into an active process. Have a chat bubble on your site so that you reach out and people turn it into a conversation, not a drive-by. And then don't be embarrassed to have a sales team who are really focused on selling things, not crossing over to just pushing stuff for the sake of it, but then actively looking to see how we can use data, how we can use particular events to now identify people who might have something that there is to buy, and then telling them about your various offerings and turning the drive-by into a paying customer. Yeah. I hope that answered the question.
That does answer the question. With pricing for SeedLegals, I guess in the early days, but even now, how often do you revisit the actual price points? And did you do any validation around asking people how much is too expensive, how much would seem too cheap, and some of that best practice advice that we hear?
Right, good question. So two parts. One of them is how often do you revisit? And the answer is constantly. And the second one is what's the Westenholz, whatever it is, elasticity of demand and so on. So one of the problems is, if you ask people what they would pay for it, people would presumably always try to tell you to pay as little as possible. And there is some evidence that if you ask people, you won't actually get the right answer. It's only putting a payment gateway in the way that will get you the right answer. So I think once you've got enough customers, you can try out different things. My takeaway point is that I suppose changing your payment gateway and all your pricing payments, pages and so on, is a lot of technical work. So as you're discovering or trying to discover different payment plans or subscription plans that you might create, how can you test them without needing to build it? So let's say we wanted to make a new pricing plan. Well, we'd have to change our public website, and then you'd have to change every page in the platform where you click to buy, and then you're on Stripe, you'd have to change that. And then the biggest problem by far is all the customers who've already bought something on the old plan. What happens when they come to buy something on the new plan? So when you change plans, you've got quite a lot of new and legacy stuff to fix. That's a lot of work. But what if your sales team at the very next call could say, our option scheme is now available on a subscription plan, and this is the price, and is this of interest? And you can actually try it, and you'll get the feedback from the person right there. Or you might say, if you look on the website, currently the price, it's priced as a one-off, but we're about to launch a subscription product at this price. Which of these might you like to go for? And the other one's not yet on the site, but I'm happy to send you a manual invoice now. So can you have people sort of vote with their wallets in a way that has less work for you to do? So one other data point, which is, you might be thinking subscription recurring revenue or one-offs. And one of the challenges at SeedLegals we've always had is that investors are always pushing you to have a recurring revenue business. Investors will, index ventures have told me they value recurring revenue at 3 to 4 times one-off revenue. So they would want every business to have something that's a subscription, either monthly or annual, recurring, and you may get heavily penalized when you're looking for funding, at least once you get to seed or Series A rounds, if you don't have a business that is substantially recurring revenue. The problem is, in some cases, that naturally matches what your customers might want. So with Slack or Google or something, you've got people and they're paying a certain amount per user per month, it makes sense on a recurring basis. But on SeedLegals, people will pay for a funding round, but don't want to pay per month when they're not fundraising. So it doesn't make any sense for me to go, it's £200 a month and you can raise anytime, because people will say, dude, I'm not raising for the next year. I'm not paying £200 a month, but when I raise, I'll happily pay you for a funding round. So sometimes, depending on your business, you've got a conflict between what you think your customers might want and what your investors might want. And this then changes ultimately the way that you might conceive of things. So for SeedLegals, we've been telling our investors, some part of our business is SaaS subscription pricing, our standard or plus plans, but other things are people buying one-offs. But they kind of repeated one-offs. I want a seed fast, and I want another seed fast, and then I'm going to do my SEIS advanced assurance, and then I'm going to do a funding round. So, but can we reinvent everything as a subscription? And that's a live discussion at the moment. So the last part of your question, which was, do you reinvent things as you go along? And the answer is for sure, because for a starting point, your business 3 years or 4 or 5 years in will have vastly more products than it had when it started. And it also will have a lot more information about what customers really want as opposed to what you thought they wanted. So when we started SeedLegals, we had a fraction of the features on the platform, and we just had a £29 a month plan. It was just the plan because that was it. And then as we added more features, we thought one of the problems, of course, is that small startups have got no money and large companies have got lots of money. So, you know, at the beginning of your business, every £10 a month is actually a serious decision. Once you're a 150-person company and you're looking at all the invoices, like a few £100 a month here and a 1,000 there and a few thousand to HubSpot, and smaller amounts are not significant. So how can you have pricing that is not that works for the company or customers and bigger customers? And so we came out with the next version, which is essentially a small, medium, large model, which is for a small amount, you get this, which is designed for small companies. Medium companies get this for a large amount, and larger companies get this. But that works if all your offerings can fit sort of small, medium, or large. The way it breaks down is where you've got, okay, you can do an option scheme, or you can do your tax credits. There's some things that apply to all companies and are not really linked to small, medium, or large. So then we decided, let's get rid of the last small, medium, and large model and come up with essentially a pay-as-you-go and a bundle. So the bundle is our plus plan to package all the things together that you might want, and the pay is you just pay as you need things. And of course, you want to make the bundle commit. But now we're looking at doing a range of additional things on a subscription model. So may we change that again? And I'm sorry if you're a customer and things are changing periodically. It's not us being super devious. It's us exploring exactly the same challenge that you're exploring, which is as you learn more, as you have more product offerings, and as indeed you get, pushed, not that it should be determining everything, but as you realize that being a SaaS recurring business is much more valuable and attractive to investors, there's always the thought of how you might reinvent, although, that should not be the major reason for doing something. The major reason for doing something is to have a great product that your customers love.
Yeah, that actually brings me nicely onto the next topic, which is getting customers to stay, and talking about all the additional products and features and then how you bundle them together. I guess, let's say you're now a founder, you've got customers, they're paying, great. How do you then get them to stay is the big overarching question. But did you prioritize features that customers wanted and prioritize which features to build by what customers were asking for as a way to increase their lifetime value with you?
Great question. And I think maybe you're divided into two parts. One of them is about product features, and the other one is when customers leave or particularly unsubscribe and churn, to understand the reason for that. So let me start with that part, because that's quite important. Are they leaving to go to a competitor? Are they leaving because they've run into technical problems, or they didn't like what you've got, or they just don't use it enough? So I was at an event with the founders of Intercom, and they were saying that they had put in their unsubscribe page, "Why are you leaving?" questionnaire, and they religiously focus on that information. And if you're leaving to go to a competitor, they will reach out to try and match the competitor's pricing, or if you're leaving because of missing product feature, they will reach out to try and find what the product feature is, and actually use that data point to quite aggressively go and chase business. And they realized quite quickly that this was a few years ago, maybe things have changed, that the largely companies that were unsubscribing were the companies that were not successful and needed to cut costs or just weren't growing. And they were not losing companies really to competitors or for lack of features and so on. And so the ones that they lost, they realized there was nothing they could have done to retain them because the company was just not growing or was going out of business. And I quite like that thinking, which is realize the ones you're losing, there was no point going after them, versus we should actually really figure out why this company, what we could have done to retain them. So armed with this information, I then went back to our team at SeedLegals and said, let's put an exit survey on our platform, so that when you unsubscribe, we ask you a list of things. Are you in fact going to a competitor? I need to go and watch that. And it turns out it took us actually probably about a year for it to make its way up the to-do list, and we finally got to do it. And I look at the data frequently, and like the 90% use case is just not enough usage. So, I signed up for my advance assurance and I'm on a plan, but it's actually the funding round's taking longer, so I'll get back to you later. So we see a pattern of essentially hardly anyone at least tells us they're leaving for a competitor, or because something didn't work or they had problems. It's mostly, I just didn't need you enough, and I'll come back when I need you again. So that was a key learning, and you should, I like the concept of this exit survey, because it gives you very valuable real information at the point the person is really trying to unsubscribe. And also, if it turns out somebody's not happy, you get a reason and enough info that hopefully you can go back to them. So I think then turning to the first part of the question, which was how to create a product that people keep wanting. And here I think the challenge is, I've got a product roadmap, and we iterate how you prioritize all the things. So firstly, you encourage people who want a feature to go create a Trello card or put in GitHub or wherever you do. And then you've got a ton of features, and the feature requests come from, strategic, my business partner and I would love to do these future things. And they come from the tech team who've got tech debt or things that they want to do. They want to upgrade to the new version of Java. And they come from customers who say, we want this type of agreement or this feature in the cap table. And they come from your sales team who want to have new things to sell. And they come from your support team who go, customers are giving us extra work because we need to do this, and if the platform could automate it or tell people about this or whatever. So you've got and then your design team, of course, want to go and make new design patterns and improve buttons. So you've got a ton of these incomings, and the question is, how do you prioritize? And there's no single answer, but ultimately it's going to do your head in about that prioritization. And I probably think of it as almost the pendulum that swings from one extreme to the other. So the one extreme is, dude, we're just going to focus on big picture things. We want to launch in these territories or launch these new products. We're drowning in too many little things we're doing. We're just going to focus on the big things. This is attractive because if you are always doing the little things, you never get to ship the big things, and you're always like tinkering and improving, but not doing the big new whatever it is that you wanted to do. But then all the little things build up, and people become unhappy, and the server doesn't work, and the tech team are not getting the things that they want. And then the pendulum swings the other way, which is you just focused on, dude, there's no point building this fantastic new thing if people are whinging on a daily basis that they can't do X or Y or Z. So we should fix this. So how do you navigate this and get the right balance? And so I think the first thing for me is I like to think of the canary in the mine with our support or tech team. So if you're hearing noise, we really need to do X, you should not ignore it like, no, we work on this big thing, because it's going to come back to haunt you later. So as soon as you are detecting that people really need something, then focus on that. So in fact, in our Monday morning stand-up today, I said, we've got literally 350 items on our backlog list, and we've got quite a good prioritization system. But even so, that's too many. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our CX, our customer support team, customer experience team, and say, each week, tell me the top 3 most important things that you would love to make your life and our customers' life happier and easier. And then we're going to focus on those 3 things. And if we keep doing that, we'll keep picking the top 3 things, and we'll have real value. And separately, of course, we still want to work on our big things. So the short answer to the question is, I think you need to religiously focus on the little things that are important, because otherwise you're just building this fancy new edifice while everyone's unhappy or just has too much friction. So you need to sort that. And then secondly, you can't just do that. So you need to devote some fraction, some balance of your time. Maybe in our case, we've got 3 Scrum teams, and each of them would, maybe they switch between different weeks, or maybe they switch this week. So our investor product team is building a whole new big thing, while our growth team is busy on improvements to R&D and option scheme and other things. Anyway, so I hope I've covered that part.
Yeah, I guess the other thing that you just touched on there, which we are going to do, so directly after Anthony's session, we've got Jeremy from Zendesk, who's going to be talking more about kind of custom ops and best practice. But how did you integrate that into the whole process? You just mentioned that the CX team might refer to feature developments that customers want, but how did you bring that support element to keep your customers staying? And do you do NPS surveys or anything so you know whether that's working?
Right, so a good point. So 2 things there. So firstly, for those who, hopefully everyone who knows me, but certainly my team know that I'm obsessed with customer happiness and delivering a great experience. And you've probably seen me hop in on chat groups and even our own web chat. I think it's totally wrong as a CEO to be doing that, but I'm obsessed that the platform and our team and service is awesome. And anytime it's not, I'll personally hop in. And I think that's super important for founders, particularly as you grow and you become maybe a bit divorced from things. So just as a product person, I realized years ago that you've got ultimately a tech team building things, and the question is, where does the list of things come from that they're doing? And if your business is too driven by sales and marketing, they just get an ongoing set of features that sales and marketing want, and they're just building more and more stuff, but nobody's knowing whether anyone loves it or not. So you have to get your customer support and all the touch points with customers feeding right back in. So my mantra is, one of the mantras is, at SeedLegals, my goal is to put unbounded capex and effort into doing something, but make it a one-click scalable solution. So the goal with our support team is, tell people, help them on whatever it is, but the 3rd time you're doing the same thing, let's enhance the platform, or let's write an article, or maybe one day AI will do it. So what we've got is a customer-driven development focus. So the input from our sales or support teams is vital, and whenever they want something, they pop it in a Slack channel, which is product ideas, so they feel like they're all product people as well, and indeed have a path to getting that done. And then I've got one of my product managers on a daily basis going through those incomings to see which ideas are actionable. And when I've got some time personally, I will hop in, and if it's some hint text wording change or an article to be written or a video, and that's in fact the inspiration for a lot of the articles and videos I do, because it's like, oh, people are asking about X. If only we had an article for that. Great. So it's really hubbing your entire way of doing development around obsessing over the customer and the things that they need. And then getting that efficiently going through to your dev team. And lastly, yes, we obsess on NPS as well, and try and break it down by area, advanced assurance, funding rounds, EMI, others. And anytime it's not good, actually the NPS scores get posted into a Slack channel that everyone in the company sees. So we all celebrate when it's good, and on the rare one where it's not, we all dive in to figure out what went wrong. And that's key to everything, is again hubbed around your customer feedback and interactions, rather than, because many companies just have this tech team that like to build shit, and somewhere else people are selling that stuff. But I think that's just wrong. The tech team need to be as close, and the senior team as close to customers as possible, and everything hubbed around that.
Yeah, I've just got 2 quick questions and then we'll move to a Q&A. So did you have any targets on like churn or lifetime value or CAC when you were first starting out? And do you think there's value in having targets for those?
I'm not the best person to ask about that because others in my team, I focus on the customer experience, I guess, and product. Others focus on revenue, CAC, and LTV. So my business partner is the genius on all of that. I don't think you can realistically have targets at the beginning because you have absolutely no idea what good is. So you can look at, you can try and find industry norms. You can try and get feedback from investors who probably know less than you do. But if you see that your monthly churn is 3% or 10%, which of them is good or bad? You might have rejects on credit card purchases. And I think actually that's exactly why forums like this or some of the founder groups where you can ask, hey, I've got a 5% monthly churn on subscriptions. What are your numbers? Because here again, unless you figure out what good or bad is, you just don't know. So I think what you would probably do is you would start off after a year, or say when you've got enough info to work out whether it's a serious problem or not, then you do something about it. So, if your customer acquisition cost is £100 and your lifetime value, which these are numbers you should try to work out quite quickly, is less than £100, then you're going to be losing money per customer. So you mustn't go spend money on Facebook or Google ads because you're just going to be bleeding yourself dry. So thing number one is to try and get the lifetime value as you can determine it above the customer acquisition cost. But then the more difficult ones are working out is a 3% monthly churn, or whatever it might be, a good or bad thing. Is a 30% annual churn good or bad? And I suppose that depends on your customer acquisition cost, of course, your lifetime value, and maybe there's success for you and the customer in the first 30 days. They've gotten exactly what they wanted. Everyone's happy. They'll come back again when they need it. Or is it something which you're needing continuously, right? So maybe somebody that's doing specializing in divorces, well, once you've got one, maybe you'll come back, but you don't need churn prevention. You just need to get it done, and that is the definition of success.
Yeah. And then final question from me, which is about referrals, getting customers to refer. Obviously, people know about the referral scheme, HelloFresh, get X amount of money off if you bring your friend along. What would you say that SeedLegals does to get referrals?
I think it's a great question. I think there are two parts. One of them is just we love each other and we'll tell our friends, and the other one is a paid referral. We have a paid referral, but really designed for accountants and so on, where there's a business relationship, and somebody might have hundreds or thousands of customers, and they might create some offer that sends people our way, or maybe there is a business advisor that's going to send people our way to do their R&D tax credits or something. But we haven't created a referral scheme for money with just customer to customer. We've thought about it several times. I think our take is let's try to focus on creating a product that people love and they'll tell their friends, rather than feeling that they need to be bribed for it. But that doesn't mean that one way is right or wrong, and mileage might vary. I think one of the things that you should consider is that some of these have got quite a hefty overhead. So you either have to spend a lot of money and resources building a referral system, so somebody can send a code and the code's a one time and that gives Bob this and this tracks back to you. I mean, lots of work is needed. Or you could skip the tech work and just do it manually. So advisor says, dear SeedLegals, I'd like to introduce my friend, and per our affiliate arrangement, they wouldn't say that in the email, and then that's a referral and they'll get paid. And that's, you don't need to build anything, but there's an overhead to manage it. Somebody's got to know that and then reconcile the purchase they've been made at the end of the month and so on. So if you've got a small number of referrers who are providing decent lead flow, then you could manually do that. But you probably need tech work if you're going to enable something broader. And of course, there are external solutions you could use as well. But we haven't gone that for the general customer to customer referral.
All right, we are going to move into founder Q&A now. Ganesh, you're the first person to have your hand up, and then we'll take a few from the chat afterwards.
Hi, Anthony. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for your time. And I also read that you'd created BBC iPlayer, so thank you for that. I wanted to ask, I run a B2C app called Spin, which helps you find tennis partners nearby, and we're looking at different growth channels. I saw that, and I've read hundreds of SeedLegal articles here and there in Google whenever I've had a query about something. How big is the content strategy as a part of your growth? And can you give us an idea of your top growth channels?
That is a great question. So, content marketing is where you write articles which are informative for your customers. Of course, are found by Google and therefore is a lead gen for traffic, and may also be things that your own team internally can use. And I think content marketing is the most important thing in early stages. So, the problem is for any company, you start building stuff and you go, ta-da, we've built it. Why is nobody coming? Where's everybody? How are people going to find me? So how are people going to find you? Well, unless you're a big social influencer yourself, either they're going to find you organically through search, which is SEO, or you're going to pay and you're going to buy paid ads, which you should really only do once you've got your product market fit and you've worked out your lifetime value is greater than your customer acquisition cost. Otherwise, all you'll do is you'll take all your investment money and give it to Google and Facebook, and they've already got more than you. So you'll bleed yourself dry, or you're going to create content and share that content, putting it out in channels. So for me, I guess for me, content marketing is the most important thing. And I'm actually super obsessed and spend a great deal of my time doing content. And in a sense, this is content. But it started off with me hating to do anything more than once, which is the third time somebody asked, let's do an article. So when people ask things, we would then research it, or I would research it. I get excited and write an article, and that article just sits there and becomes a magnet and sets you and your company as a thought leader. And now I've got a problem, which is if I need to do some research on SEIS, I'm trying to search the government website, but our articles come up as number one. So it's like, that's no good. I wrote the article. I'm not learning anything here, but that's good. So I think people underrate content marketing, and you should really focus doing that. You can get your whole team to write articles. It excites everyone. And once you've written an article, you can point them to the article, so it's massive efficiency for you. So I'll give you, just before I wrap up on that, an example, which is one of SeedLegal's customers. I love buying from our customers. So when I see in Slack that somebody's bought, if it looks like it's a food thing, I'll go to their website sometimes and check it out. And this one did green tea, and I love green tea. And they had a beautiful website with pictures of green tea, and you could buy it. But I was really disappointed because they had no content. And so the only interaction was basically I arrive at the site as a kind of a drive-by, look at some pictures of things I could buy, and there's nothing else for me to do. But I was thinking they're so squandering an opportunity, because they are, in theory, passionate and thought leaders on this. They should have articles on how, virgins in Japan pick the green tea from the top of Mount Fuji in midnight to get the finest blossoms, or whatever it is, or how to boil it at what temperature. Had they had 50 articles on this, they would have then gotten these into food magazines, and Google would have found it. And even if I wasn't ready to buy, I would have stuck around and go back there for more advice and eventually buy. So the takeaway point from me is, content marketing, it's free. I mean, you're not paying anyone. It's long-term valuable. It excites your team, and it gets your team to be experts on things that they otherwise may not do. And finally, it helps on efficiency. When they have a question, they can just point at an article. So you definitely want to focus on that.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right, now I'm going to take a question from Marco in the chat, and then Mikhail will go to you. Marco, I know that you've added a bit more context about this question. So if you want to come on live and ask it or add more details, feel free. If not, I will start to read off your question. Oh, no, I
Yeah,
see.
sure. Yeah, thank you. Hi, thank you very much for this, Anthony, for this the very, very interesting session. In the beginning, when we were talking about because this was our essentially approach for a while, when you were talking about, you can't take the money off of them, in advance because, you're not sure yet that they'll be happy and all that. But you want to arrive to some sort of an agreement that they agree to pay if they're happy, right? Now, I've tried several times this approach, and it's like always gets to like sort of bogged down into like what does it mean and what the details are, and then in the end, essentially, yes. So if they are very fair and everything, and it's a reusable value, right? Then obviously it's easier because then if they find it useful, they will come again. But there are certain services that are one-time in nature, such as your advance approvals, for example, stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
So
I hear you, and I think I've got enough info to answer.
Okay.
And of course, that's a super important question. I think the trick, it's not to make it discretionary. It's not. I wasn't saying that if you liked what we did, then you'll pay us, because that leads to no end of problem. What you should do is you should make it look like your company's been around for yonks, and this is just business as usual. So imagine, so let's say when we started SeedLegals, we hadn't fully automated funding rounds. We had a nice website, you could enter the deal terms. Behind the scenes, our team were busy manually writing Word documents and so on. And so they're going, no, please, you have to automate it before this kills us. But we didn't know whether investors would like the documents that we had. We didn't know whether we could deal with the things that people wanted. We didn't know if we could deal with it in time. So asking them to pay, £3,000 for their funding round up front would set, if the person's already paid, then they're going to expect that everything will be delivered without blemish. If we'd said, you can pay us if you liked us, then it sounds like it's kind of like amateur hour. But instead, there could be simply the pop-ups that says, by proceeding, you're agreeing to pay us on completion and the amount will be X. And then it just looks like business as usual. But if things don't work out, then the person hasn't paid anything. You don't need to think of that you have to refund them and so on. So try to set it so that the person sees it as an existing business rather than, you making it up as you go along. And by the way, there are many ways of doing it. But I think that when you've got customers, if they see that your business is in its early days, they're much more forgiving. And in fact, they're delightfully forgiving. So when I see startups on SeedLegals that, have food things, as I said, I buy the food and I can see like the beta version, the packaging is like homemade cardboard and the ice pack thing is melted by the time it gets there. And it's okay, because I know that they're early stage startup, and when they've got their funding, they'll have the special packaging and the whatever it is and the beautiful containers, and they're getting there. So you're okay with that. But I think the game then is to try and set things up so in the early phases, customers are going to be with you and forgiving when they see things, and will give you feedback on things in a good way. And most vast majority of people are delightful and want to help, in my experience. But the two-way part of it is to try to set it up so that it's paid on delivery, or maybe there'll be milestones, right? Because in some cases, getting payment afterwards is always a lot more difficult than getting payment up front. So you could end up with a lot of debt that just goes on and isn't claimed.
Yeah.
So that is an unwanted side effect, and maybe you can create it so it's part up front and part on completion. There are many possibilities, and that's, you can see on SeedLegals, when you open your round, we charge something up front because we put unlimited help and support. And if you just paid on completion, it would open a moral hazard, so to speak, that people just keep opening rounds with no cost. And then we'd put a lot of effort in and they go, oh, that was great. No, we'll go elsewhere. So on the flip side, charging everything up front isn't going to work, because you can't pay us because you don't have money, because you haven't got a funding round. So try to mix and match between what works for both parties, I think is key.
Okay, so there are obviously two components. If you're in B2B space, right, there are two. Let's forget about for the moment of the specificity about the product that you're offering or a service, which in some cases essentially is done. Once it's done, you know that it was good, but then you know it's too late. There is another thing which is in B2B, especially with large companies, you have to go through the procurement process, right? So they have to onboard you as a supplier. Now, if you don't do that in advance, you're almost guaranteed never to get paid, because once it's been done, right, unless it's a subscription type situation, right? Once the service has been done, it's just there's absolutely no motivation in people who are completely in different parts of the company. And
I've got it, and I think I would probably maybe succinctly put it into, if you're confident that you can deliver the service that is being purchased, then try to bill as much as you can upfront. If you're not confident that you can deliver the service, then you might be better off only billing afterwards. So, you know, maybe we want to build some new product for accelerators, let's say hypothetically, and we don't yet know what accelerators want. So if we told them it's £3,000 and you buy now, but we don't know the features they want, it's quite possible we just can't deliver the service that we have promised, and then it becomes just unhappy experience all round if they've paid and you can't deliver it. So maybe that's really the key thing. If you know you can deliver it, by all means, build it up front, but then you're on the hook for having to deliver it, as opposed to if you want to walk away because it was just too much of a stretch, or you couldn't do it, you've got 3 competing projects, and you know, then billing afterwards might make for a happier experience if you can't deliver.
But even in that case, you probably want the procurement to be done, right?
I'm going to jump in because we've got to move on to the next question. But if you do have a follow-up, you can put it in the chat, and if we have time, we'll get to it. Okay, Mikhail, you're up.
Thank you, Mikhail from Alpha Sales. We build electronic sales notebook for complex sales. I want to come back to Ganesh's questions because I think it was very helpful, and to add to that, if you could comment on the frequent, so it was about generating content like articles. Can you comment from your experience on the frequency of generating the content? And because I've heard so many advices when I starting from post every day and make sure every day there's something, and in between strategy is like, you know, post regularly. If it's every Monday, make sure you have something for every Monday, to the advice saying just post whenever you have something to say, otherwise you risk damaging, right? Like posting for it.
It's a great question, and I don't profess to have the answer, but I think you might put it as a few different goals, and then you might get to the answer. So if your goal is to have ultimately a great body of content that you know, survives over time and is good for SEO and things like that, then I think it's post or write an article when you've got something to say. And that's really what I like to do. And personally, I get obsessed about this. I'm being the bonnet about some new government thing, and I'm going to write an article on it. And it doesn't matter if my content team is going, Anthony, it's Tuesday, you need a new article. No, I either have something or I don't. Separately, if you're trying to build a social following and you're posting on Twitter or LinkedIn and so on, then I think the idea is that, and I'm not the expert, but then regular posting. And then there's a formula, which is you're not writing long form content. You actually might be writing something more provocative or something that asks a question. So look at some of the folks who are quite popular on LinkedIn or may pop up on your feed. Maybe they'll it's not about having a body of content that's interesting, it's creating a conversation, and they're different things. So the conversation ones are, you know, every day or every 2 days or whatever formula you're going to find works. But these are often ephemeral conversations. What you're doing is you're building your own personal brand, as opposed to having a set of content that helps companies or customers see that the company is a thought leader that is answering their questions and is getting traffic. And maybe by putting in those 2 buckets, then you get the answer. I think there's one other thing, which is who is the right person to write a great article. And I'm putting aside, the LinkedIn posts like funding rounds are down. What do you reckon? Is the government good or bad? It's like people wade in. If you want to build your brand, do that. That doesn't excite me. But when it comes to a useful article, I think the challenge is there are some people in the business who know all about, in my earlier case, tea production on Mount Fuji, that may be terrible for writing beautiful English articles. And there are other people in the business who write beautiful English, but know nothing about tea cultivation. So how do you find the right mix? Do you go to the people, the domain experts in your company to write an article and then give it to a content person to turn it into great words and a great story? Or do you have your content team say, team, you need to write 3 articles, and then you discover they've just Googled it, and in fact, they've given you the same stuff that ChatGPT would have given, which is a bit meh, and you've got nothing special. So personally, I don't like creating articles that are not unique in terms of content that you wouldn't get elsewhere in our tone of voice, packaged up as a solution. And I do not like stuff that's written that's just like, we need another article on, something great, look at the internet, cobble something together. And that's difficult, but you'll find your own feet on what works and what doesn't.
All right, Adam, I was just about to take your question in the chat, but I see you raised your hand, so let's go for it. And then Tony will try to get yours in too.
Thank you, and yeah, thanks, Anthony. I think this is the sycophant segment. Big fan of SeedLegals. I'm often referring you. I hope some of these people come through. I know a couple have. My question's around referrals and if you've seen any good models. I think I'm going to make this sound complicated, but I consider myself to be B2B to C to C, and the last C is community. So actually getting through to an enterprise company that feeds down into its audience, then the audience becomes a fanatic, if you like, and they feed into building a community, which makes, again, the funnel start over again. So just wondering if you've seen any really good referral models, not necessarily exactly like mine, but it'd be good to know if you've seen something that that really has caught your eye, and whether that's something SeedLegals sometimes taps into, looking at the way the community marketing can work.
Great question. I might put it in two parts. One of them is creating the customer love and community that has people want to tell each other and connect with you and so on. And the other one is creating an incentive scheme that helps push that along. So of course you always, if your audience is a community essentially, so let's say on SeedLegals, we might put our offerings into something like R&D tax credits. So there are like 1 million companies in the UK that might want R&D tax credits. We've got some small market share there, but there's no community. You don't get meetings of R&D. There's just like millions of people, and if you have a great product at the right price point and they get to know about you, then they'll hopefully buy something from you. Otherwise, they'll buy from someone else. Separately, there are funding rounds and there are startups, and startups hang out in the same places. They talk to their friends, they join Hotbed. And so being in the place where that community exists helps you be part of the community and leverage something called there's product-led growth, which is build it and they'll come, and there's community-led growth, which is be part of the community and people see you and are visible. So for me, I've always, I've learned that the community-led growth and community is super important. But this is going to vary greatly depending on whether your business is selling to an audience that could be a community. Sometimes it's a big community, so Behance and Dribbble and so on, content creators or designers. But if you can be part of a community, this is so much more powerful than just buying pay-per-click ads for something for the whole world. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you can tap into the power of the community and you happen to be in a business area that has that, that's great. I guess the key thing is to realize that there could be a community and find out where that community go and tap into it. So in the case of the green tea one, well, they might well hang out on Facebook groups or, go to certain places. Certainly from what I see on, Slack and WhatsApp groups, there are a lot of indie community groups for people who are sole traders or, shop owners or whatever it might be. So identifying a community and then trying to helpfully be part of that without being spammy is important. Crossing over quickly then to the second part is, can you create an offering, which is, I'll give you share options if you promote it, or for everyone you refer, you get a token, and if you do something. You could definitely explore those. They all have an admin and a setup cost associated, and I guess the thing to keep in mind is all the time you're busy working on this token referral scheme or whatever it might be, or options, or whatever it is time that you're not spending on your product. So you want to be a bit cautious that it doesn't become, this diversion becomes a goal in its own, at the end of which you've built this amazing token referral scheme and you've totally missed the point of people wanting anything from you. So I hope that was a useful brain dump.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Okay, and if we can do the last question in like 30 seconds. Tony, you're up.
Yeah. Hi, Anthony. Just wanted to understand a little bit more about when you first took the jump and got a salesperson in, the first anecdote that you shared with us. So you're passionate about the product and you were getting great reviews, just nice that people sign in. And how did you get to that realization, and after how long?
It's a great question. I think that's a great question to end with as well, because I think I've realized in retrospect that it's that switching of gears in your company's mentality from building to selling, which is super important. And, as if you're a tech or product founder, what you get up out of bed in the morning is to build stuff, and selling things feels mildly embarrassing. It's like, it loses the purity. And it's been said that when you start selling things, you move from purpose to performance. And some of your earliest joiners might have been fixated on this problem you're solving, and actually somebody giving you money and buying it seems like a bit of a cop-out almost. But the problem is you'll never have a business if you don't get past that. And so for me, the switchover point was realizing that for me, I'm always trying to delight, and my colleagues always tease me about, Anthony, you keep giving stuff away for free and so on. That's because it's the driver for me, but we would never have a business if it was just me doing it. It needs separately the people who get out of bed in the morning to make their sales targets. And if it was just them, there'd be no business, because there'd be nothing wonderful that was built that the people want. But it's a combination of the two. And I think that it's that switching point which is important. That often happens around between your seed and your Series A round, because if you think about funding rounds, your angel round, raising a few $100K SEIS or EIS, is you haven't built it yet, and people are investing in you and the vision. They have no idea if it works or not, but they're investing for you to build it. A seed round, raising 500 or 700K or whatever, is you've built it, and you haven't yet proved you can build it, and you've got some usage, and people are now investing to get it to scale. And a Series A round is where you've proved that people will pay for it, and you've now got a good idea of what your customer acquisition costs and your lifetime value and your market size. And now investors are giving you millions for you to then spend that on Facebook and Google to buy advertising, because you've built the thing, you've worked out that you can sell it, and now you are spending on essentially sales and marketing to scale up the rate at which you can get it in front of your audience. So if you think of it along that journey, then your sales team are going to come along. Well, so maybe I'll spend just a moment on when the sales team should be there. So if you hire a salesperson too early, they'll get very frustrated and probably leave because you've got nothing to sell. So, your CTO said, we'll have this built in like 4 months. So you go, great. We'll find a salesperson to arrive in 3.5 months. The salesperson arrives, the thing's nowhere near shippable. And the salesperson's going, what do I do? I've had 3 calls, there's nothing to show. I've had a call, the server was down. And so they're disillusioned. If you leave it too late, you keep building more and more stuff, waiting for perfection, because you've got in your mind this roadmap of all the stuff that you want to build, and you're embarrassed to release it until it's all there. And you're just spending more and more pounds building stuff without validating that anyone wants it or anyone will pay for it. So the trick, which is hard to know up front, is to get your first salesperson at the point that you're about ready to have something to sell. It doesn't need to be perfect, because remember that probably half the stuff you built is stuff that nobody's going to care about or want, and half the stuff people want is stuff that you haven't thought to build yet. So waiting to build everything in your mind is going to be counterproductive. It's said that if you're not embarrassed by your first release, you've left it too late. But there's no point having a salesperson, you know, twiddling their thumbs, and also avoid hiring like a, you know, head of sales or something, because they're going to want to go off and build a team. They're not going to want to be on sales calls. So your first person salespeople need to be the doers who will take calls and sit on beanbags, and later on when they're selling, then you can get your, you know, your head of to build that team.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks. That's a really good answer, and thanks for sharing that.
All right, we unfortunately have to wrap right there. We're going to jump into our next session in just a few minutes. But first of all, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us and for your time.
I had the feeling we could easily go for another half hour or more, but I hope that was useful. And you know where to reach me, Anthony at SeedLegals.com. I don't claim to be an expert on this. Obviously, we have been through some of that. And I'm delighted to share any more if anyone would like any thoughts.
Thanks
all.
Thank you.